That story. Or restart.
Yeah, Johnathan Livingston Seagull, yeah? This wonderful children's story that I read as a teenager when I was suicidal the first time in my life. I wanted to end my life, and I read this story. And it just, in a word, it spoke to me of mastery. It spoke to me of this bird's longing and desire to master flight, and the difficulty in doing that. He was outcast from his mother and his father. All the other birds questioned him. They thought he was nuts, thought he was out of his mind. But he was just driven. While they all wanted to chase for scraps of food and do the bird thing with the flock, Johnathan was compelled to go off on his own, out in the far reaches of the rocks, and get up as high as he could and see how fast he could dive and how deeply he could dive into the water. And it's always stuck with me, especially toward the end of the story, because Johnathan is outcast from the flock and is adopted by other master birds and gets to experience life at another level, being surrounded by individuals, other birds in his case, that also chose to be so unique, so masterful in their way of living and being with each other, with themselves, that their self-awareness was not something that could be found in the flock. And there was an old bird, one of the older master birds, whose name was Chang. And I'll never forget, as the story goes, that Johnathan and Chang were speaking, and Chang asked Johnathan, said, "Johnathan, what is perfect speed?" And of course, Johnathan tried to answer this in the realm of time and space and how fast he could fly. And while he was doing this, Chang would literally disappear and reappear. And Chang offered to Johnathan that, "John, perfect speed is being there." And that's the moment I'm having right here, right now. It's just this sense of being here. So I can only hope in some way that through this video capture and audio and the crashing of the waves on the beach and the reflecting on the seagulls that you have a sense of being here and how perfect it might be for you as well. And then Chang needs to move on to another level of his mastery, and he's about to leave. And the last thing that Chang says to Johnathan is, "John, keep working on love. Keep working on love." And then he disappears. And Johnathan is left to go back and again teach the lessons of flight and speed at flight and mastery of flight to the other master level birds, with this new seed planted in him of perfect speed as being there, and this master bird that he so admired in Chang, reminding him that love really is maybe even more significant and important than how fast or how accurately one can do something in time and space. So that's just all coming back to me now. 51 turns around the sun I've had, what, 30 some years ago, reading that story. And here this half German standing in Europe, in Portugal, half American, in some way returning to my roots. There's a sense of my German half being back in Europe, and this sea that connects, and Portugal's history of being the explorers and the pioneers, the Johnathan Livingstons, sailing off into the sea to explore, to discover, to find the new world, and make a connection, right? Build a bridge between this east and west world, which now my life has brought me to Portugal to connect with Portuguese people. And I've never been here before. It's the first time in my life that I've come to Portugal. And I'm so impressed and I'm so inspired by the example I see here and the history I'm understanding of how Portugal has represented a country that is, what's the word? Less driven to be competitive, and more driven possibly to be creative and discoverers and explorers of a bigger world, a larger world, and finding the new routes of trade and commerce, a new way of being, maybe even more important than the need to do anything, because there's such a nice relaxed at easeness here, the ability to be as being more important than anything you're doing, and to be in the company of others, sharing that. is giving birth to Beloved Miracles TV network in a way that I couldn't have dreamed it up any better. I truly couldn't have imagined a better setting, a better scene, a better context to fulfill my own story, to fulfill my own destiny, you could say, at the same time that I'm reminding each of us that we have our own. Every one of us has a story to be told, a reason to be in the circumstances that we're in. And it's not just for ourselves, as Johnathan was demonstrating in the children's story. It was to be shared. It was to be extended in a way that hopefully could inspire others. And there's another part to the book worth mentioning right now, which is that Johnathan and some of the other master birds at the end of the story were compelled to go back to the flock, the scrap fighting, fishing boat chasing seagulls whose life was all about food and how much they could find and eat and get for themselves and take away from the other birds around them, and show those birds of the flock that there was another way, there was another choice, a different way to be, and out of that different way of being, a different way to do and live a life. And here I am extending to you through this message that same invitation to not necessarily judge or think you woulda, shoulda, coulda done something different, but just to realize that there are choices, there are freedoms, as the Portuguese people clearly understood generations ago in their history. There were choices that could be made that mapped out a bigger world, that gave us new trade routes, new ways of doing business and commerce, new ways of sharing a story, sharing a message, and inspiring others to share their own. So I hope this does that for you. I hope that my small sharing of my story is not so important for a story by itself. It's more important as a story that unites and can be shared in a larger story, like the human story. And I hope that's one of overcoming and strengthening family and finding a peace of mind, no matter what our circumstances are, finding a peace of mind that allows us to accept, as I had to do as a teenager, to accept the circumstances I found myself in and realize that there was a reason for that. There was a reason, even if I didn't understand it in the moment, there was a reason for it that I could trust in, that I could take my next steps, I could be patient enough to await the next steps being shown to me, and that I would have the strength and the courage to take those steps. And looking back, it's so obvious, right, in hindsight, to reflect back on what's played out over all those years. So hang in there, stay tough, remember who you are, remember that every one of us has a Johnathan Livingston inside of us, even if we haven't woken up to it yet. It's there, and it's a choice we can make at any point in time. Because perfect speed really is being there. And keep working on love. I'd have to say the same thing Chang said. In my experience, there's been nothing more significant than that word. And not to get an answer, but just to keep asking the question of what is love? And what is it to you? And what is it shared with another? And now being married and being a father, it truly is the greatest question that I've ever asked and that I continue to answer in my own way, and to be here in Portugal sharing it with others in their way, asking and answering the same question and working on love. Keep working on love. That's it for now from Portugal. Thank you. There's a need to walk a little bit if you're